The first night I came to the cabin, the forest seemed to breathe around me. The wind sighed through the pines, and the lake below caught the last fading threads of the moon. Everything smelled of damp earth and old leaves, the kind of scent that makes you think of stories you've forgotten. I'd come here to be alone. That was the plan, at least. The cabin had been my grandfather's, though no one had used it for years. When I unlocked the door, the hinges gave a long, low groan, like the house itself was waking from a long sleep. Inside, the air was still and cool. Dust motes floated in the beam of my lantern, turning slowly, as if time here had its own rhythm. There was one chair by the window, a small fireplace, and shelves lined with books swollen by humidity. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes right before the world begins to shift. That night, I lit a fire. The wood crackled and hissed. The shadows leaned closer. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, the fire had burned low, and someone was sitting in the chair by the window. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The figure was pale, outlined by moonlight, and yet he seemed more there than the rest of the room. He turned his head slightly, and I saw his eyes. They weren't frightening, just sad, like the reflection of rain in a still pond. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Then he spoke, softly, as though afraid of breaking something fragile. "You shouldn't stay here alone." His voice was like the whisper of pine needles. I blinked, and he was gone. The next morning, I told myself it was exhaustion or the remnants of a dream. I busied myself with small things, sweeping the floor, airing out the sheets, boiling tea. But sometimes, when I turned around, I'd feel the faintest shift in the air, like someone had just stepped out of the room. By the third night, I stopped pretending. I spoke into the quiet. "If you're still here, I don't mind." The fire flickered. A breath of cold brushed my cheek, and when I looked up, he was standing near the door. He looked young, maybe my age, maybe a little older. His hair was tousled like he'd walked through the wind, and his clothes were simple, old-fashioned, frayed at the edges. "You shouldn't talk to ghosts," he said, with a faint smile. "It makes them remember things they shouldn't." I told him I didn't care. His smile faded, replaced by something softer, surprise, maybe, or relief. He came closer, each step soundless, and stopped beside the fire. I could see right through him, faintly, as if he were made of light and shadow mixed together. "I used to live here," he said, "long ago, before the pines grew so tall." His name was Elias. He'd been a wanderer, a musician who came to the cabin one winter to escape the world. The forest, he said, had been kinder than people were, but he never left. He'd died here, alone, while the snow fell silently outside. When he told me that, I felt something ache in my chest. Not fear, never fear, but a kind of yearning, as though my heart had known him long before my mind did. From then on, the nights changed. I'd make tea and set out 2 cups. The second always stayed full, but I liked pretending. We'd sit by the fire and talk or not talk. Sometimes I'd read aloud from the old books, and he'd close his eyes, humming quietly, as if remembering a melody he'd once played. There was a gentleness in him, like the hush before dawn. Days passed in a kind of dream. The forest grew colder. The wind sang through the cracks of the cabin, and the night stretched longer. Yet I no longer felt alone. Sometimes, when I fell asleep in the chair, I'd wake to the feeling of a cool hand brushing my hair back, or the softest whisper, "You should rest," and I'd smile, half dreaming, half awake. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, I found him standing at the edge of the lake. The world was white and quiet. The reflection of his form shimmered faintly on the ice. "Elias," I said, "what will happen when winter ends?" He looked at me, and I knew what he meant to say before he spoke. "When the thaw comes, I'll fade. The cabin holds me only while the forest sleeps." The wind stirred between us, scattering snowflakes like tiny ghosts. I felt my throat tighten. "Then I'll stay," I said. "I'll stay until spring." He turned toward me slowly, a look of disbelief softening into something luminous. He reached out, and for the first time, I felt his touch, cold but real. Our hands met, just for a moment. The world seemed to exhale. "No one's ever said that to me before," he whispered. That night, I dreamed we sat beside the fire, our fingers barely touching, the air full of pine and smoke. He hummed an old tune, low and steady, and I drifted between sleep and waking, his presence like a heartbeat beside me. Winter deepened. Days turned to weeks, and still Elias lingered. Days turned to weeks, and still Elias lingered. Sometimes he would fade when the sun rose, only to return at twilight. We spoke less. Words became unnecessary. The silence between us felt like understanding. And then, one dawn, I woke to find a fire burned down to embers, and the world outside beginning to thaw. I knew what that meant. He was sitting by the window, the morning light passing through him like mist. He looked almost human again, almost alive. "You kept your promise," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. He stood, walked over to me, and for the first time, I felt warmth where his hand touched mine. Not cold warmth, the kind that sinks into your skin and stays. "When the forest sleeps again," he murmured, "I'll find you, wherever you are." Then he leaned forward and kissed me. It was like touching a memory, like breathing in the last note of a song. and when I opened my eyes, he was gone. The cabin was empty, but the room was full of light. I stayed through spring and summer and into autumn again. Every time the wind sighed through the pines, I thought I heard his voice, low, content, no longer lonely. And some nights, when the fire burned low, I'd wake to see a shadow seated by the window, watching over me. Not sad this time, just waiting for the forest to sleep again, for our next winter together. Thank you for listening to Whisper in the Pines. May your night be quiet, your dreams kind, and may love find you, even in the stillness.